Keep the change.
Hi. How are you feeling?
Fine.
Do you want a coffee?
No, thank you.
Well, the good news is you've got Judge Draper. Silks don't like him because he cuts to the chase, but I've always found him fair.
Right.
But the defence barrister has got a bit of a reputation.
It's strange. I wasn't expecting to be cross-examined by a woman.
No, it's quite common in rape cases. Jurors are less uneasy with the questions coming from a woman.
I see.
Anyway, today should basically be about what you prepared with your barrister.
Right.
Just try and relax. Take your time.
Yeah.
Now, I know you said you didn't want witness support, but you may wish to change your mind. It can be useful talking to someone unconnected with the case. Oh, that shouldn't happen. Come on, I'll take you to the witness room.
No.
Vivian, look at me. They're going straight down to the cells.
I can't do this. I'm sorry.
Mr. Wilson, hello. Miss March said you were a friend.
Yes.
Is she here?
And the ladies?
Nerves.
Yeah.
She should be fine. She's a really strong witness.
Yeah, stronger than she looks, maybe.
Absolutely. We'll look after her. Don't worry.
See you later.
The boys are in good spirits, and they cope well with remand.
Vivian. Listen, it's okay to be nervous. All right, that's what court's all about. I get nervous when I'm presenting a big case. So this is okay, it's natural. You know this is really brave, a decision to be a witness. To put yourself through this and face the defendants. And the reason you did it, I think, is because you wanted a chance at getting justice. For you and for Mary Lambton. Because you're the only one who can tell the court what you went through. If you withdraw your evidence now, both your cases, yours and Mary's, will fall through. And those two young men are going to walk free. This is your decision, Vivian.
How is Mary?
She's still in hospital, there's no change.
Can you leave now, please?
All rise.
A man commits rape if he has sexual intercourse with a person who at the time of the intercourse doesn't consent to it, and if he knows that consent is not given. Ryan and Lee Parker are accused of double rape. Physical evidence tells us that intercourse took place. We can only suppose that consent wasn't given, as Mrs. Lambton is in a coma as a result of the alleged attack and is unable to be a witness in this case. The prosecution case is that Ryan and Lee Parker committed an almost identical offence a few weeks before. They are accused of raping another woman, inflicting a similar set of cuts on her wrist. Vivian March will give evidence that she did not give consent. She was violently assaulted in her own home by two young men, one of whom she was able to positively identify as the defendant, Ryan Parker.
Vivian March.
Can you tell the court your name?
Vivian March.
And do you work, Miss March?
Yes, I'm a receptionist at the Mill Health Centre.
Have you been there long?
About 2 years.
And what were you doing before that?
I cared for my mother. She had dementia. She died about 5 months before I was employed at the mill. Before that, I was a hospital matron.
We're going to talk about the events of 16th of June 2008. Is there a reason why this date sticks out in your mind?
Yes. It was the day before my driving test, as well as being the day that I was attacked.
Can you describe the day leading up to the incident?
I went to work, as usual, and finished about 6. Then I went to the Icon Bar in Leatherbridge with some of my colleagues. They wanted to wish me luck.
And what time did you return home?
About 7 o'clock. I wanted to get an early night. I wanted to be ready. I've been preparing for my test for months.
So you came home at around 7. Did you notice anything unusual on your return?
There'd been a break-in, I knew straight away. The drawers were out in the sitting room and there were cushions on the floor. That's when I saw the young man.
Can you describe him?
Yes, he was white, dark-haired, with a little beard. He was in his late teens, early 20s.
We'll refer to this individual as Man 1. What happened then?
I shouted at him to get out, the first words that came into my head. And that's when I saw the other man. He was slightly younger, white, slim-built.
Now, on the 26th of August 2008, you attended an identity police procedure at Leatherbridge Police Station. Is that right?
Yes.
And were you able to identify the man who attacked you?
Yes.
My lord, I have a written statement from PC Bullers which confirms that on the 26th of August 2008, Miss March took part in a police identity procedure and identified number 4 as her attacker. Number 4 was Ryan Parker, the defendant, who we'll refer to today as Man 2.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland.
So, Man 1 and Man 2 were in your house. Can you tell us what happened then?
Man 2 had a knife. He pointed it at me and told me to sit on the sofa. I said that there was no money in the house, and I offered to give him what was in my purse. I offered him my car. Man 1 wanted to take it, but Man 2 wouldn't let him. That's when they started arguing. That's when I found out their names.
Then what happened?
Ryan...
Man 2.
No, I just said that's when I found out their names.
I know it may seem rather cumbersome, Miss March, but please refer to them in this manner.
Man 2 said it was time to do what he came for. He may have been younger, but he certainly was in charge. He pulled me up and dragged me towards the stairs. But I pulled back. I wouldn't go. That's when he shouted at Man 1 to help him. And then he put the knife to my throat.
What was going through your head at that point?
Alarm, obviously. I could understand a burglary, but the other, it seemed preposterous. Man 1 was behind me, pushing me up the stairs, and Man 2 was in front of me with a knife. And I wasn't going to plead with them like some helpless old woman.
So, you got up the stairs, then what did they do?
They pulled me into the bedroom and pushed me onto the bed. Man 1 was standing in the doorway. That's when I knew. By the expression on his face.
What did you know?
That they were going to rape me.
Would you like a break, Miss March?
No, I'd like to carry on.
Are you sure?
Perfectly.
So then what happened?
Man 1 held my hands above my head. Man 2 pulled my underwear down. He knelt on the bed. I heard the rustle of clothing. And then he penetrated me.
Did either of them say anything?
Man 2 shouted at me to scream, but I wouldn't.
Why not?
I wouldn't give him a satisfaction.
And is it also true that you were also trying to shut out what was happening?
My lord, Mr. Sutherland is clearly leading his witness.
Why should I have screamed? My neighbours were on holiday. What good would that have done? And I didn't know what they were going to do next.
So, when you refused Mantoux orders, what did he do?
He cut my arm with a knife.
He cut your arm?
Several times. I didn't feel it at first. It was only later when it wouldn't stop bleeding. It could have done with a few stitches, but by the time I told Dr. Clay, it was too late.
What happened after Mantoux cut your arm?
He finished his business and got off me. Man 1 let go of my arms and I pulled them down to where I could see them. There was blood everywhere. I tried to pinch them to stop the blood going on my bedspread.
How were you feeling?
Relief. But it was over. I thought that if I just lay there, they'd lose interest and go.
And did they?
Not before Mantoux pushed me onto the floor. He said he couldn't stand to look at me. Which was fine, that suited me, because I didn't want to look at him.
How long did you stay on the floor?
Until the morning.
What time was that?
About 5:30.
You stayed lying there beside the bed for 10 hours.
Yes.
How were you feeling?
I can't remember.
Did you try to get up?
No. There was a rug and it was June. I was perfectly comfortable.
Did you think they'd come back?
There was always that chance.
So how were you feeling? Miss March?
I was in a state of shock. Not surprising, seeing as I'd just been raped. I knew I'd be all right once I got into my stride. I'm used to public speaking as a matron. And when I do a bit of staff training at the mill.
It's good to see you so strong and composed.
I survived. If it had been a more feeble victim, they may well have ended up in hospital like Mary.
Have you thought about the impression you're making?
What?
You're not really telling the jury how you feel.
But that's obvious.
It isn't.
How do they think I feel? Do they want me to spell it out?
They don't know you, Vivian. Just try and put yourself in their shoes. You're smart, you're forthright, you're sure of yourself. But those two boys, they're young, unemployed, uneducated. The defense are going to try and paint them as being victims of society and do everything they can to discredit you.
But that is ridiculous.
That's what I do. That's why you've got to try and make the jury understand what they put you through.
So what you're saying is that I have to parade some shopping list of emotions to a room of complete strangers?
I'm asking you to be honest and try and be brave enough to get past the anger.
No, I won't do it. I've endured those boys, the fear and the degradation, and I never once lost my dignity. So don't ask me to do it now.
All rise!
Juniper Road.
Copy that. Please yourself.
Any joy?
I can't find her.
The judge will give us 10 minutes grace.
I don't think there's any point.
Okay. Then I'll ask the jury to retire.
Welcome back, Miss March.
Thank you.
Would you take the stand? Mrs. Haviland?
Thank you, my lord. So, we were talking about what happened directly after the attack.
Yes.
You said that man 2 pushed you on the floor beside the bed and you stayed there till morning.
Yes.
Was your arm hurting?
Yes, it was stinging.
Did you have any pain anywhere else?
You mean where he'd entered me?
Yes.
No, I could feel nothing.
Nothing?
Well, not nothing exactly. It was a kind of numbness. I didn't want to feel anything. I didn't want to look. That's why I lay there and I didn't move. Eventually, it was as if my body wasn't there at all.
So, while you were lying there frozen, what were you thinking about?
The blood on the bedspread.
The blood?
Yes, I knew that it didn't matter, but my mind kept returning to it, worrying away. You know when you're in bed just before you go to sleep and you remember there's something that you've got to do? Well, it was like that. I kept going over it in my head. Strip the bed, go down to the kitchen, fill the sink with water. You know, there were times in the night when I convinced myself that I'd actually done it. And I was thinking about the driving test. I was worrying that I hadn't had enough sleep, that the examiner would be able to tell. I thought at that point that I was still going to do it. I knew that I'd been raped, but I didn't know what was expected, what I was supposed to do, and I didn't want to let anybody down. After a while, I let my mind go. And I started thinking about my mother. I thought about sitting beside her bed before she passed away. And I remembered when she was young and I was a child, and I remembered the holidays that we'd had by the sea.
So when did you finally get up from the floor?
When the birds were singing in the morning. I pulled myself up slowly, and then I went downstairs. The house was very messy, and my arm was bleeding. So I got the first aid kit and I patched it up the best I could.
Did you think about phoning the police?
Yes, straight away, but I dialed the number, but I couldn't say anything.
So then what did you do?
I stripped the bed finally and I put it in the sink. And then I had a bath. And then I called the police again.
And what did you tell them?
I said that I'd been burgled.
Just that?
Yes, I couldn't say it. The words were screaming in my head, 10 foot tall, but I couldn't say it out loud. I just wasn't ready.
And did a police officer come round?
Yes. Constable Shaw. If it had been a different sort of policeman, I might have been... But he was so robust, so matter of fact, I didn't want to put him out.
Put him out? You didn't want to inconvenience him?
I was brought up not to make a fuss. Not to draw attention to myself. My parents didn't approve of excessive emotions. I knew there were bad-mannered and ill-bred people in the world, but I was taught to ignore it, to look the other way. I can remember my father once coming home from a social occasion. It was the first and only time that I'd seen him drunk. And I was packed off to bed with no supper, and he slept on the sofa. The next morning, when I came down, he'd wet himself. My mother cleaned it up the best she could, and it was never acknowledged, never spoken of again. And even though it had nothing to do with me, I can still feel my mother's disappointment. And that's how I felt. That shame. That two young men could do something so wrong, so mortifying, And all I knew was to look the other way, to clean up the mess and pretend it never happened.
So, what did you tell Constable Shaw?
I told him that I'd been burgled and that they'd run away. We talked about the break-in and he advised me on home security. He told me to keep busy and I made him a cup of tea.
Did he notice your arm was hurt?
No. He knew that I was upset and he advised me to take victim support. I wanted to tell him it wasn't about the burglary, but I could see how his whole manner would have changed, how I would have had to reassure him. So, I signed the statement and he went.
Then what happened?
Then Dr. Clay arrived. He'd been worried about me. I was going to take my test that day and they hadn't heard anything. I'd finally realized I had to cancel because the police were coming around. He saw that my arm was bleeding and he dressed it. And that's when I told him that I'd been raped. It's different when it's someone you know.
What was his response?
He told me to report it. His partner was the late D.I. Moore, and it would have been easy for her to manage it. But I felt stronger by then. I told Dr. Clay, and that was enough. I didn't want anybody else to know.
So how did you cope over the next few days?
I went back to work as usual. My colleagues were very sympathetic about the burglary, and I booked myself a driving test.
So when did you decide to talk to the police?
When I read about Mary Lampton, that her injuries were the same as mine. But that's not why I'm here today. It's been 5 months, and the scars on my arm have almost healed, and I'm not in a coma like Mary, but my world has been turned upside down too. I used to feel secure. I knew who I was, where I fitted in. Being mature, you have experience and understanding. I thought nothing could surprise me anymore. And I may be old-fashioned and out of touch. And I realize that there isn't so much emphasis put on manners and respecting your elders nowadays. But I keep thinking about how I would explain this to my mother. That 2 young men could do such a thing. And of course I couldn't. I wouldn't. And I'm glad for that she's passed away. And that I don't have a husband or a child. And that it's only me that has to deal with this. Because you see, now every man is a threat. The taxi driver who brought me here this morning, a perfectly innocent man, I'm sure. And I've taken taxis all my life, but when I looked in the mirror, I started shaking, sweating. And in the break, I tried to get a taxi home, but I couldn't. Because you can't tell from a face. You can't tell from looking what a man is capable of. But I know good men, lots of them. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life being scared of half the population. Because it's not any men. It's those 2 men there. And all I really want is for them to be punished or treated so they never do this to anyone else again. So that's why I came today, because I am the only chance I have of restoring some normality. So that I can sit in my own house and not have to check the doors and the windows. And that I can ride in a taxi without breaking into a sweat, because this isn't me. I am not a victim, and I will not let those 2 make me one.
Well done. Not quite what we talked about, but it did the job.
They did really well. I was watching the jury and they were right behind you.
It's too early to say which way it'll go, but definitely an encouraging first day. Anyway, see you back on the ice tomorrow.
Is that all it is? A contest?
Oh, when you come down to it, I suppose so.
And I'm just collateral damage?
No.
Yes, Mr. Woodson. Because I'm going to have to come back here tomorrow and go through it all again, only this time on Miss Jameson's terms. So she gets to poke about in my personal life, making insinuations and judgments. I now know how this thing works.
If she's too hard on you, then she'll alienate the jury.
They'll trust her because she's a woman. That's what you said.
However tough it is, you're doing the right thing.
Oh, you think so?
Don't you?
Right for who? We both know that statistically the jury are unlikely to convict. So it's not right for Lee and Ryan Parker or Mary Lambton. And I don't see what good it's doing me.
What? Tell me this is a joke.
I suppose in your world, she'd just have to submit to leeches.
Well, in your world, we'd be paying her to experiment on her body without even knowing what the outcome was.
That's the truth as I remember it.
As you remember it?
Yes.
You're not sure of anything, are you, Miss March?
This argument is not over. I've got the measure of her now. Whatever she throws at me, I'll be able to cope.
Targeting the homeless, a killer stalks the streets in Diagnosis Murder, next here on BBC1 Scotland. And then later, another 9 brave the insults. Public humiliation awaits the weakest link at 5:15.